Let's go to Irene. She's on the line in St. Albert. Hi, Irene.
Yes, I think the adults are forgetting the children. If a child is leaving the room in junior high, that is mortifying to walk up and leave the room because certain topics are being discussed as though your ears are too fragile or you cannot think for yourself. And even more importantly, if a youth, say in junior high, identifies themselves as gay or lesbian, their very existence causes peers in their classroom to have to leave. You cannot leave the room as an adult if someone says something contrary to what you believe or contrary to your orientation or your faith. It is poor training for children.
That's an interesting point you're making, Irene, that it makes it very difficult for the child to actually have to be removed from that situation because could it place a stigma on that child, do you think, Irene?
I think social peers, I'm thinking primarily of junior high, when this would have the most personal meaning to the child, the youth. And I would, going back, I'm elderly, but going back to have to stand up in front of your peers and leave because your mother and father feel you cannot listen. You don't have to agree. You can go home and discuss it. Your parents can reinforce your views. But I never liked even going up to the blackboard at junior high. You really feel you're too short or too tall or too this or too that. I think it will have an impact on all the children in the room to be able to learn to live with others.
Thank you very much for expressing that view. And Ken, why don't we hear from a couple more callers and then I'll get your reaction, because that way we can hear from as many people as possible. We'll go to Dave now, who's on the line in Red Deer. Hello, Dave.
Yes, hello.
Hi, what are your thoughts on Bill 44?
Yeah, I just have one question. Lindsay Blackett, the minister in charge, had a very, very good point and concerns. He referred to the Human Rights Commission's sort of tribunals as kangaroo courts, and from some of the situations with Ezra Levant or Stephen Boisson here in Red Deer, we can see the tremendous inequalities and very, very mean judgments that they've brought about to these people. My question is, why, when Lindsay Blackett, the very minister of this particular portfolio of concern, why would he have these concerns, part of the Conservative Party, and yet he seems to be shoved to the very back of the room and overruled?
That's a good question that you're asking, Dave, because it is odd also that the human rights legislation would be part of the Culture and Community Spirit Department, isn't it, Ken? I mean,
yes, it is.
There's a number of different things that seem to be disconnects in all of this. Why don't you address Dave's questions?
It's a good question, Dave, and there are a lot of people who think that human rights commissions are in fact kangaroo courts. I don't think that. I think there's a fundamental problem with their administration and their structure, and I think that it was also part of the Sheldon Schumer review that said you can't be the investigator and the adjudicator at the same time. And that's the problem with the way human rights legislations have been set up. These are virtually quasi-judicial boards when they go into a tribunal. I have actually been an inquiry officer on one of these human rights cases in the days of Elaine McCoy. But if you're going to be the investigator, you can hardly be the prosecutor. You can be the prosecutor, but you ought not to be the judge. And it's been suggested that those two functions be split, and I think everybody's pretty much in favor of that. But it hasn't come up in this time. It was recommended, but it wasn't a recommendation that was accepted. The other thing you have to understand is human rights commissions do everything in their power to negotiate compromises and settlements before they ever get into the official process. They really are focused on education and engagement of people before they're into adjudication. And that's what takes some time in this process, too.
Thanks very much for phoning, Dave. Let's go to Jill, who's calling us from Calgary. Hi, Jill.
Hi. I'm a teacher myself, and I was just calling to say I've written numerous emails already to the Premier and my MLA and the Minister of Education. I haven't heard back from anyone except my MLA, and I've just been talking with my other teacher friends, and we can't even imagine how frustrating this is going to be in the classroom. Like your guest has already said, it's just going to be a nightmare, and it's frustrating to know that the Premier is still trying to go ahead with this.
Jill, is this a conversation that you have with your colleagues? Like, I mean, what happened when you heard about the changes a few days ago? I mean, have you been talking about this as a group at your school?
Oh, absolutely. The frustration is it's beyond. I can't even imagine it. Along with everybody else I've been talking to, and we almost feel voiceless that we're not hearing anything back from the Premier, and he's still going ahead with this. It's really frustrating.
The Premier's just back in town today. He's been in Europe, and he wasn't there for the debate. The debate was last Wednesday on second reading. So you're onto the right track here. I think that the Premier is back today. It's his birthday, by the way. You might want to wish him happy birthday and then bring this up in your next email. But I think you've got to focus on the Premier's office and the Minister of Culture and Community Spirit and the Minister of Education. Those are the people that are going to be the most influential on this decision. But I really think that teachers have to step up and tell people and have us understand in the general public what the consequences to public education is on this, and also how you feel about it, because I think you folks are going to be terrified every time you go into the classroom now that somebody's going to say something and you're going to be hauled up in front of a tribunal because some reactionary parent decides to take it on for political purposes.
Oh, absolutely. I taught evolution on Friday, and I was scared, so...
Thank you very much for expressing that, Jill. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go now to James, who's on the line in Calgary. Hello, James.
Yeah, thanks very much, Donna. You know, I think at least everyone else in the province is now getting a taste of what it's like to live with a gang who can't shoot straight. I mean, I'm in the oil industry, and we lived through this royalty review, and this is almost reminiscent of what happened there. These guys make a decision, and then they step forward without any forethought and live with what we're going to call unintended consequences. And the thing that really strikes me in all of this is that if you have a belief system which precludes you from, let's just say, the mainstream, you're probably educating your child at home on a homeschooling basis. And so who exactly are these children in the public mainstream who aren't in a Jewish or Islamic or Christian school who have these points of views that need to be excluded in the classroom? When we're talking about an inclusive society, this really seems quite an odd approach.
You know, I think James' initial point that this is reminiscent of the royalty review changes is something that I've heard outside as well. On the street there, people are suggesting that maybe there wasn't enough consultation done ahead of time, that they aren't really hearing from the people who are going to be affected by this.
He brings up a good point, but it's very different from the royalty review. There was a full 15 months of public consultation in that regard, and the report was made public as soon as the Premier got it, and for 5 or 6 weeks we had debates over it. This has come out of the blue from nowhere as an amendment and a piece of legislation that nobody anticipated. But I think he's got a really good point in that I've gotten some emails over the weekend from evangelicals and fundamentalist Christians, and they've said to me is that we left the public system because of it being too secular years ago. We're not even there anymore for the most part. This is a problem this is a solution rather looking for a problem. Don't understand why it's going to be there. There's lots of choices in terms of charter schools and private schools and religious-based schools that and homeschooling that can solve this problem for those who have a serious concern about it. And we pay 80% of that kind of funding. So I'm agreeing with James on everything except what he said about royalties.
But is there a reverse problem there that if I have my child in a Christian school because it's a good school, and they come to teach about a certain approach from a Christian perspective on an issue, could I opt out on that, or is that an issue for, if I'm secular, is that an issue for the Human Rights Tribunal?
Well, it's what it comes down to. It's discussion of sexuality, of religion, not religious instruction, or sexual orientation. There ought to be an exemption. But there's an interesting angle here that I'm just starting to look at, and there's a possibility of an interesting legal argument there, James, is that it deals with school boards under with school boards under the School Act, and that means the public or the separate system. It doesn't necessarily, and those are defined as who have school districts. The private schools, the charter schools, and the religious schools do not have school districts. They may be exempt from this legislation. Don't know if they are or not, but it's an interesting argument.
Yeah. James, thanks very much for making that point, though. We appreciate it.